Stress does not arrive politely. It invades. It floods your chest, tightens your thoughts, shortens your breath, and turns your own mind into a place you no longer recognize. One moment, you are simply living your day. The next, you are trapped inside racing thoughts, imagined disasters, silent panic, and an exhaustion that feels heavier than the problem itself. And this is where most people lose the battle. Not because life became impossible, but because they began to obey every fearful thought as if it were the truth. The Stoics saw this clearly long before the modern world became addicted to urgency. They understood that the disturbed mind is not always the result of a difficult life, but often the result of an undisciplined response to difficulty. Epictetus taught this with brutal clarity in Enchiridion of Epictetus, section 5, when he explained that people are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. That means stress is not only happening around you, it is being amplified within you. It is being fed by interpretation, by impulsive meaning, by the habit of mentally surrendering before reality has even spoken its final word. Think about how often this happens in ordinary life. An unanswered message becomes rejection. A mistake becomes humiliation. A delay becomes disaster. A difficult conversation becomes a threat to your peace for the entire day. The event is small, but the mind turns it into a storm. This is why so many people are not crushed by life itself, but by the noise they create around life. And once that noise grows loud enough, they stop thinking clearly, stop acting wisely, and start reacting like prisoners of inner chaos. Marcus Aurelius warned himself about this again and again in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 8, paragraph 36. He reminded himself that the mind can convert itself into calm at any moment when it stops feeding agitation. That is the doorway most people never use. They wait for the world to calm down first. The Stoic does the opposite. He calms the judgment, and then the world loses its power to shake him. That is not denial. That is mastery. In this video, you are going to see why mental noise feels stronger than you, why stress becomes overwhelming the moment you obey it, and how the Stoic method teaches you to reclaim authority over your own inner world. Not with empty motivation, not with fragile positivity, with discipline, with perception, with practical control you can use in the middle of a hard day, a heavy emotion, a restless night, or a moment when your mind wants to run faster than your wisdom. Because the real question is not whether stress will visit your life. It will. The real question is this: when it enters, will your mind kneel before it, or will it remain standing? First, the noise is not the enemy, your obedience to it is. The first mistake people make when stress takes over is believing the noise in their mind is the true problem. They think the racing thoughts, the tight chest, the urge to fix everything at once, the emotional pressure, that all of this is the enemy. But the Stoic sees deeper. The noise is only the signal. The real danger begins when you obey it. The moment you treat every anxious thought like an order, you hand over your peace, your judgment, and your strength. Stress gains power, not because it speaks, but because you listen without questioning. This is why two people can face the same setback and collapse in completely different ways. One loses control, imagines the worst, reacts too fast, and drains himself before the real problem even unfolds. The other pauses, steadies his perception, and refuses to turn discomfort into panic. The event may be the same, but the inner response changes everything. Seneca pointed directly to this in Letters from a Stoic by Seneca, letter 13, when he warned that we often suffer more in imagination than in reality. That single idea exposes how stress becomes tyrannical. It does not need a catastrophe. It only needs your cooperation. Look closely at how this works in daily life. You wake up already tense, then one email changes your mood. One unexpected expense makes your mind jump to ruin. One cold response from someone you care about convinces you that something is wrong. Nothing has fully happened yet, but inside you, the trial has already begun. The body reacts, the thoughts accelerate, and soon you are no longer dealing with a fact. You are dealing with a chain reaction. That reaction feels automatic, but much of it is trained. It is the habit of submitting to inner urgency without first examining whether the urgency deserves obedience. Marco Aurelio constantly pulled himself back from this trap. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 8, paragraph 47, he reminded himself to erase impressions that drag the soul around like a puppet. That image is unforgettable because it is exactly what stress does when left unchecked. It pulls, it jerks, it commands. It makes you open the phone again, replay the conversation again, rehearse the fear again, explain yourself too much, rush your decisions, and live in emotional servitude to thoughts that have not earned authority over you. The Stoic response is not to pretend the pressure is not real. It is to refuse to become its servant. This is where practical discipline begins. When stress rises, do not ask, "How do I make this feeling disappear right now?" Ask, "What is this feeling trying to make me do?" That question changes everything. It places distance between you and the impulse. Maybe stress is trying to make you answer too quickly. Maybe it is trying to make you assume rejection. Maybe it is trying to make you control what is not yours to control. Once you see the command hidden inside the emotion, you can interrupt it. A simple daily strategy is to create a deliberate pause before action. When a stressful moment hits, stop for 10 seconds and name the impulse with precision. Say to yourself, "This is the urge to panic. This is the urge to explain. This is the urge to imagine disaster." Naming the impulse weakens its control because clarity breaks emotional hypnosis. Another useful practice is to reduce the size of the moment. Stress always speaks in total language. It says everything is falling apart. It says you cannot handle this. It says this changes everything. Answer it with specifics. What exactly happened? What has not happened yet? What is under my control in the next 10 minutes? Epictetus built his whole method around this return to what belongs to you and what does not. In Discourses of Epictetus, Book 1, Chapter 1, he makes it clear that confusion begins when we try to govern what was never ours. The anxious mind wants to dominate outcomes, people, timing, and certainty. The disciplined mind returns to conduct, choice, posture, and action. This is the turning point most people miss. Peace does not begin when the noise ends. Peace begins when obedience ends. You may still feel the pressure in your body. You may still hear the voice of fear. But the moment you stop treating that voice like a master, your strength starts to return. And once you understand that stress feeds on blind submission, you are ready to face something even deeper. Why does the mind give stress so much power in the first place? Why does one event become an emotional avalanche inside us? The answer is more revealing than most people are prepared to hear. Second, stress feeds on meaning, and Stoicism takes that meaning away. Stress becomes dangerous when the mind stops seeing an event for what it is and starts turning it into a verdict about your whole life. This is the hidden mechanism most people never notice. A problem appears, but the mind does not leave it in its original size. It adds meaning. It says this delay means failure. It says this silence means rejection. It says this criticism means you are not enough. It says this uncertainty means something terrible is coming. And once the mind attaches that kind of meaning to an event, stress multiplies. It no longer feels like you are facing one moment. It feels like you are facing your future, your worth, your security, and your identity all at once. This is why Stoicism is so powerful. It does not begin by trying to remove every difficulty from life. It begins by stripping away the false meanings that make difficulty unbearable. Epictetus made this brutally clear in Enchiridion of Epictetus, section 5, when he said that people are disturbed not by things but by the views they take of them. That teaching is not abstract. It is practical in the most immediate way. It means that before stress can dominate you, your mind must first interpret reality in a way that gives stress permission to grow. Notice how fast this happens in ordinary moments. Someone changes their tone, and your mind turns it into a sign that the relationship is weakening. A plan does not work, and your mind turns it into proof that your effort is pointless. You make one mistake, and suddenly you are not dealing with a mistake anymore. You are dealing with shame, self-judgment, imagined consequences, and the fear that you will never recover. The event happened once, but inside the mind, it keeps happening because you are feeding it meaning over and over again. Stress lives on repetition. It grows in interpretation. It survives because the mind keeps narrating danger where there may only be discomfort. Seneca understood this deeply. In Letters from a Stoic by Seneca, letter 13, he warns that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. That line cuts straight through modern anxiety because it reveals the real battlefield. Most people are not exhausted only by what happened. They are exhausted by what they keep telling themselves about what happened. The body reacts to the story as if it were already fact. The heart races, the chest tightens, the mind searches for escape. But the story was never tested, it was only believed. Marco Aurelio trained himself to interrupt this process. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 4, paragraph 7, he reminds himself to remove the judgment, and the complaint disappears. Remove the thought, I am harmed, and the harm itself disappears. He was not saying pain is imaginary. He was saying the extra layer of suffering often comes from the mind's conclusion about the pain. That is a radical difference. One is reality, the other is mental embroidery. One demands action, the other drains strength. So, what do you do with this in daily life? The first practical strategy is to challenge the first meaning your mind creates. Not the event itself, the meaning. When stress rises, ask, what story am I adding to this? Be honest. Maybe the story is, I am losing control. Maybe it is, people will think less of me. Maybe it is, this always happens to me. Maybe it is, I will not be able to handle what comes next. Once the story is named, ask a second question. Is this fact or is this interpretation? That small separation is one of the most powerful forms of emotional discipline because it weakens the illusion that every thought is reality. A second practical strategy is to use plain language when your mind becomes dramatic. Replace emotional exaggeration with direct description. Instead of saying, everything is collapsing, say, one plan changed. Instead of saying, this is a disaster, say, this is inconvenient and I need to respond well. Instead of saying, I cannot take this, say, I do not like this, but I can face it. This is not wordplay. It is mental training. Language shapes internal experience. The more extreme your internal language becomes, the more your nervous system treats the moment like a threat. The more accurate your language becomes, the more space you create for reason. A third strategy is to delay your conclusions. Stress wants instant meaning. It wants you to decide right now that the worst explanation is the true one. The Stoic refuses this rush. He says, I will not label this moment before I understand it. I will not turn uncertainty into prophecy. I will not make one event define the whole story. This discipline protects your mind from emotional fraud. Many things that look threatening in 1 hour look manageable in 1 day and insignificant in 1 month. B remains in your control and stand there. But stress always tries to convince you that the current feeling is permanent truth. This is the freedom Stoicism offers. It teaches you that peace does not come from controlling every outcome. It comes from refusing to let your mind invent a meaning that reality never confirmed. Once you take away the exaggerated meaning, stress loses much of its fuel. It may still knock on the door, but it no longer gets to rule the house. And that leads to the deepest lesson of all. If silence is not something you wait to feel, then it must be something you train. It must become a discipline strong enough to stand firm even when the storm inside you begs to be obeyed. Third, silence is a discipline, not a mood. Most people wait for silence as if it were a gift the world should hand to them. They wait for the pressure to pass, for people to behave better, for uncertainty to disappear, for the mind to calm itself down. But that is why they remain trapped for so long. They treat inner peace like a mood, something that arrives when life becomes easier. The Stoic sees it differently. Silence is not a mood, it is a discipline. It is built in the exact moments when everything inside you wants to react, defend, predict, control, or collapse. This is what makes Stoicism so demanding and so powerful at the same time. It does not tell you to become calm, only when calm feels natural. It teaches you to practice steadiness while discomfort is still alive in your body. That is where real character is formed. Marco Aurelio did not write to himself in moments of comfort only. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 5, Paragraph 1, he had to remind himself to rise and do the work of a human being even when his body resisted and his mind wanted ease. That is the essence of discipline. You do not wait for harmony before acting with order. You create order through repeated action. This matters because stress is deeply physical. It is not just a thought. It is tension in the jaw, speed in the breath, agitation in the chest, restlessness in the hands, urgency in the voice. If you only try to fight stress with ideas but your habits remain impulsive, the body keeps reinforcing the same emotional state. That is why silence must be trained through behavior. Your actions must teach your mind that it no longer gets to lead through panic. Start with the simplest form of discipline, controlling the first outward reaction. When stress rises, lower your speed on purpose. Speak more slowly. Walk more slowly. Put the phone down before replying. Sit before making the next decision. This may sound small, but it is powerful because stress thrives on acceleration. The mind says move now, answer now, fix now, prove now, escape now. The disciplined person interrupts the momentum. He shows the body that urgency will not automatically become action. This is not weakness. This is command. Musonio Rufo taught that philosophy is not something to admire from a distance. It is something to practice in conduct. That is why one of the most effective daily strategies is to build a ritual of voluntary stillness before the day begins. Sit for a few minutes without music, without scrolling, without noise, without reaching for stimulation. Let the mind complain. Let it become restless. Do not obey it. This trains a deeper muscle than most people realize. It teaches you that discomfort can be witnessed without immediate reaction. The person who cannot sit with himself in silence for a few minutes will struggle to remain composed when life becomes demanding. Another practical strategy is to rehearse calm before you need it. Seneca often prepared his mind in advance for difficulty. In On the Shortness of Life and throughout Letters from a Stoic by Seneca, he returns to the idea that the unprepared mind is easily shocked by what it should have expected. Each morning, ask yourself what might test you today: delay, criticism, misunderstanding, fatigue, inconvenience, rejection. Then decide in advance who you will be when it arrives. Not what you hope to feel, but how you will behave. I will not rush my speech. I will not surrender to the first interpretation. I will return to the facts. I will protect my posture. I will keep my dignity. This is how silence becomes trained rather than wished for. You can also create a reset practice for the middle of a hard day. When you notice the mind spiraling, step away for 2 minutes and return to 3 anchors. What is happening right now? What is under my control right now? What kind of person do I want to be right now? These questions pull you out of emotional fog and back into moral clarity. Stoicism is powerful because it does not ask first, how do I feel? It asks, what is the right way to respond? That shift is often enough to break the spell of stress. There is another truth people do not like to hear. Mental silence is not proven in peaceful moments. It is proven in provocation. Anyone can seem centered when life is gentle. The test comes when the message is cold, when the plan fails, when the body is tired, when the room feels unfair, when fear asks for control. In those moments, every restrained word, every delayed reaction, every refusal to dramatize, every return to what is in your control becomes evidence that your mind is no longer ruled by impulse. Little by little, silence stops being something you visit and becomes someone you are becoming. This is why the Stoic is not passive. He is powerful in a way the world rarely understands. He does not need to be loud to be strong. He does not need to react to prove he cares. He does not need to collapse to show that life is hard. He remains steady because he has trained himself to carry pressure without surrendering his center. That is real emotional authority. That is real resilience. And now the most important part remains. Knowing this is not enough. Admiring it is not enough. The person you become next depends on whether you keep negotiating with chaos or whether you make a decision that changes the way you live from this day forward. Your mind will not become quiet because life suddenly becomes merciful. It will become quiet when you stop giving every fear a throne, every impulse a voice, and every stressful moment permission to define you. This is the line that separates people who remain trapped in inner chaos from those who begin to build real strength. One keeps reacting, explaining, rushing, imagining, collapsing. The other starts ruling, not the world, not other people, the self. And that is where freedom begins. You already know what stress does when it is left in command. It makes you abandon your clarity, betray your priorities, lose your posture, and speak from places you later regret. It convinces you that intensity is truth and that panic is preparation. But the Stoics taught something greater. They taught that a person does not rise by controlling every event around them. A person rises by refusing to be conquered within. Epictetus built his philosophy on this foundation. If you cannot govern your own judgments, the world will govern you through them. If you cannot hold your ground against your own mind, every inconvenience will feel like power over your life. So this is the moment to decide. Not admire the message, not agree with it for a few minutes and return to the same habits tomorrow. Decide. Decide that the next time stress enters your chest, you will not bow immediately. Decide that the next anxious thought will not be treated like a command. Decide that the next difficult moment will not automatically become a personal catastrophe inside your head. Decide that your peace will no longer depend on perfect timing, perfect people, or perfect outcomes. That is not wishful thinking. That is discipline made visible. Start small, but start with seriousness. The next time your thoughts race, slow your body before you answer. The next time your mind invents the worst meaning, return to the facts before you believe the story. The next time pressure builds, ask what remains in your control, and stand there. Do this again and again until calm stops being an accident and becomes your standard. This is how mental silence is forged. Not in theory, in repetition, in restraint, in the private moments where no one sees the battle except you. Marco Aurelio wrote to himself as a man surrounded by pressure, responsibility, fatigue, and uncertainty, yet he kept returning to one truth. Your mind can become what it chooses to practice. That is the warning, but it is also the hope. If you keep practicing panic, panic will feel natural. If you keep practicing steadiness, steadiness will become part of your character. Every day, you are training something. The only question is what. So do not leave this message inspired and unchanged. Leave it decided. Let today be the day you stop negotiating with mental chaos. Let today be the day you reclaim authority over your reactions, your interpretations, your voice, and your inner life. The world has enough people ruled by pressure. Become one of the rare few who can stand in the middle of it, breathe, see clearly, and remain unshaken.